Hello, Dr. C.
Hello, how are you?
I'm good, how are you?
Very good, thank you. So, what brings you to my office today?
Well, dwarfism runs in my family, and I was just wondering what the odds were of my kid having dwarfism.
Well, where do you want me to start?
Well, I want to know more about the specifics.
Well, do you know what dwarfism is?
A little bit. Some condition where the recipients are under 4'10", I believe.
It is also as a result of a medical or genetic condition, and is characterized by the advocacy group, Little People of America.
I knew that, but can you tell me if my children will get it?
Well, possibly. Everybody has at least a small chance to have a baby who is born with dwarfism. About 1 in 10,000 babies are born with dwarfism. However, to determine what the specific chances are, I need to know who in your family had dwarfism.
My wife. My wife has dwarfism.
Your wife, okay.
Can you tell me about the different diseases that my kid might get then?
Yeah, within dwarfism there are many types of diseases.
Alright.
So the most common one is achondroplasia. It is inherited in a dominant manner.
Alright.
And it occurs in one in about 26,000 to 40,000 babies, and is usually detected at birth. People with achondroplasia have a relatively long trunk and shortened upper body parts of their arms and legs.
Alright. So, I heard skeletal dysplasias, which are conditions of not normal bone growth that causes uneven dwarfism. Are there any other diseases under that category?
Well, yes, there are two other conditions, which are spondyloepiphyseal dysplasias, SED, and diastrophic dysplasia. SED is a less common form of dwarfism and affects approximately 1 in 95,000 babies. Spondyloepiphyseal dysplasia refers to a group of conditions characterized by a shortened trunk. This may not become noticeable, however, until a child is between the ages of 5 and 10, so keep an eye on your kid to see if they develop this. However, other features can accompany the shortened trunk, which include club feet, cleft palate, severe osteoarthritis in the hips, weak hands and feet, or barrel-chested appearance. Diastrophic dysplasia is a rare form of dwarfism. Diastrophic dysplasia occurs in 1 in about 100,000 births. People who have it tend to have shortened forearms and calves. This is known as mesomelic shortening.
Alright, so that's a lot to take in. Is it alright if I come back tomorrow to learn more?
Sure, yeah.
Alright, thank you very much.
No problem. Have a
See you
nice day.
tomorrow. Yeah, you too.
Tomorrow.
Come in.
Hi, Dr. C.
Hi.
I did a little bit of research on my family's history and got a pedigree complete.
Okay.
Want to take a look?
Sure.
So in my research, I found that dwarfism is of autosomal dominant inheritance. This means that if one parent is affected, half of the children will be. This is shown in the pedigree I've drawn, as my wife's mother is also a dwarf. My mother-in-law was born from 2 normal parents. In fact, did you know that 4 out of 5 cases of dwarves were born from normal parents? Anyway, I have figured out that there is a 50% chance of my child being a dwarf. I reviewed my grade 11 biology and learnt about the Punnett square again. This is the Punnett square for my wife and I. As you can see, the big D is dominant for dwarfism, whereas the little d is recessive for normal stature. I found that there is no point in showing the karyotype because a dwarf's karyotype is the same as a normal person. This is because dwarfism has to do with alleles, and alleles aren't normally shown on a karyotype.
Yeah, it's very good.
Alright, so I also researched that proportionate dwarfism, some of the causes include metabolic and hormonal disorders. What are some examples of the proportional disorders?
Well, the big one that comes to mind is growth hormone deficiency. Now, what do you know when, where, or how dwarfism started?
I don't know the first recorded case of dwarfism. However, I do know that dwarves in ancient Egyptian culture were seen highly of and partook in very important positions. What was the first recorded case of dwarfism?
It was actually Caroline Crociani, who was the first recognized individual with primordial dwarfism. Now, Caroline was from Palermo, Italy, and was born in the year of 1815. And Caroline traveled with a Dr. Gilligan, with whom she made many appearances in exhibitions in London. And different things were reported about Caroline, and one was that her voice was thin and high-pitched.
Now, what do you know about how dwarfism got its name?
I do know that the term dwarf was used in fairy tales like Snow White and the Seven Dwarves, but maybe over time they just added ism to the end of it to make it politically correct.
That is actually pretty much correct.
Oh.
Since the term midget is now thought of to be used as a derogatory word for people of short stature.
Right, so what is prognosis of dwarfism?
In most cases, the life expectancy is normal, and the overall mental performance scores are not affected. But some children may have slight deficiencies in visual spatial tasks. And death in the first year of life is not uncommon due to pressure on the spinal cord, caused by defects at the craniocervical junction.
Oh, so tell me what you used to diagnose dwarfism.
There are many different tests to determine if the subject has dwarfism.
Oh, okay. So I heard that there are tests that require technology and ones they can do without technology or lab work. Is that true?
Oh, of course. The ones that don't require technology are appearances, measurements, family history, etc.
Right. So what are the ones that do require technology then?
Well, tests that require technology is imaging, such as X-rays. These are used because certain defects of the skull and skeleton can present which disorder the subject may have. And different imaging devices may also show slow maturation of bones, as is the case in growth hormone deficiency. A magnetic resonance imaging, MRI, scan may determine irregularities of the pituitary gland or hypothalamus, both of which play a big part in hormone function.
What about prenatal ultrasounds?
Well, for achondroplasia, the most common type of dwarfism, it can be detected prenatally by the use of a prenatal ultrasound.
Alright, so is there another category of test?
Yes, in fact, there are genetic tests performed, such as DNA tests, that is performed before birth to see if the baby will have homozygosity for cases with achondroplasia.
Sorry, what is homozygosity?
It is where two copies of the dwarfism gene are inherited, and in this case, a condition leading to a baby born dead or dies within a few weeks of birth is created.
Oh, what about other tests?
Well, genetic tests have limitations, but can be performed prenatally and postnatally. For example, the prenatal test is where they take samples of blood or body tissues to determine if there is anybody who carries the dwarfism gene. Depending on mental toughness, the prenatal test is not usually too invasive. The test will show if you're positive for dwarfism or negative, you don't carry it. It would appear that this form of testing is pretty accurate, as parents are encouraged to have this test done when their child can possibly have dwarfism.
Can you tell me about the hormone test?
Well, this test is done postnatally. For an accurate reading of hormone levels, a stimulation test is performed. This is where they draw blood and insert medicine that stimulates the pituitary gland that produces hormones. They then take several more blood samples after the medicine is inserted, and they make the bleeding stop eventually.
Oh, okay.
And this test is pretty accurate and simple, and shows if the subject is negative, don't have deficiency, or positive, they do have deficiency, for growth hormone deficiency being the reason for slowed growth.
So what's the problem with just diagnosing it now? Are there ethical issues or something?
Yes, there are.
I see. So people find out their child is going to be disabled and should they basically just want the abortion?
Exactly. People with dwarfism typically are quoted to have a lower standard of life.
Right. I did a little research on this and I read about Peter Singer.
What about him?
How he advocates that disabled fetuses should just be routinely aborted. And if they're not, to kill them within 28 days. I find it terrible, to be honest. But that's the world we live in.
Yeah, there is a lot of controversy about aborting disabled fetuses. It's all up to the parents, it's not up to the doctor. In all honesty, this disability does influence the family.
How come? Will we have to buy medication or new appliances?
You will likely have to purchase new appliances, but there is no medication to fix this. However, there is also the option of surgery. Surgery may be advised to relieve pressure on the nervous system, generally at the base of the skull and lower back, or to open obstructed airways by removing the adenoids.
Alright, I see. So basically there are issues with knowing if our child will have dwarfism. We could have negative thoughts sort of before they're even born, or we may even go for an abortion. But then again, knowing if they will be a dwarf will help us to prepare. After all, my wife and mother-in-law do have it. They're still fun people.
I'm glad you understand, but I recommend you go home and think about this with your wife. If we perform prenatal test and it turns out that your child will be a dwarf, what will you do? How will you handle it? These are some questions to consider.
Thank you. Are there any websites that I can visit to learn more?
Here, this is a page with many different resources.
Oh, perfect. Thank you. I'll look into it. Thank you.
Have
Have a nice day.
You too.
Namaste.